You've probably heard of postpartum depression, but have you heard of postpartum anxiety? In this video, we're going to talk about the differences. Growing up, I had heard the term postpartum depression, and I kind of understood what it was, but I had never heard of postpartum anxiety until I experienced it myself. In this video, we're going to talk about the differences between postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression. I personally experienced postpartum anxiety, so I know more about that side, but with postpartum depression, there are different symptoms that I'm aware of based on the stories that my friends have told me and what I've read about. First, let's talk about postpartum anxiety and the symptoms that I experienced with it. Some of the symptoms that I remember feeling right after having my first baby was irritation. I was irritated at everything and everyone. I was also really angry for no reason whatsoever. I would get angry at the tiniest thing and end up yelling at everybody. I was also really overwhelmed. I felt every emotion super intensely. If I was happy, I was super happy. If I was mad, I was super mad. If I was sad, I was really sad. So I was constantly overwhelmed because I was feeling everything big. I had big feelings, so it was incredibly overwhelming. Two other symptoms that I had right after having my baby, but was something that I've kind of struggled with my whole life, was having nausea, which is a symptom of anxiety, which I later learned, and also disassociation. This is something that actually triggered me looking into what these symptoms were for me. I felt like somebody else was living my life. I felt like I was locked inside of my own head, watching somebody else in my body live my life. And after some Google research, because where else could I turn, I found out that that was called disassociation, and that's a symptom of anxiety. The scariest symptom for me for postpartum anxiety was just the feeling of fear. I would be walking down the hall holding my baby, worried that I would hit his head on the corner of the hallway, or walk downstairs and have this terrifying feeling that I was gonna drop him and kill him. And I would have these vivid visions in my head of him falling down the stairs and just exploding or popping, or, just, it sounds awful to say, but that's how I was feeling. And it turns out that's postpartum anxiety. I didn't know it at the time, but I wasn't alone. Since then, I have heard other stories of postpartum anxiety, and some of them even said that they had those same feelings, and I have never felt so validated. So I'm here to tell you, you're not alone. Now that we've talked about postpartum anxiety, let's talk about postpartum depression. From what I understand from my friends who have suffered with postpartum depression, and just based on what I've read between the differences of postpartum depression and anxiety, postpartum depression is more worrying about the past and feelings of sadness, emptiness, lack of connection, lack of interest in things you used to be interested in, and that wasn't what I was experiencing at all. So I knew that I had something, but it wasn't depression. Postpartum depression is incredibly common, so now people are talking about it, which is fantastic. But it turns out postpartum anxiety is just as common, and there's not as many people talking about it, which is a huge reason why I wanted to do this video today. Now that you've heard what my symptoms were with postpartum anxiety compared to what my friends had with postpartum depression, there's a key difference that you can keep in mind. This helped me really understand the difference between the two. I read something that just said it perfectly. Postpartum depression is worrying and obsessing about the past, versus postpartum anxiety is worrying and obsessing over the future. After learning about that key difference, I realized that I was constantly obsessing about the future, about things that hadn't even happened yet or wouldn't even happen. If you want to take more of a deep dive into my experience with postpartum anxiety, there's a link in the description below for a blog I wrote about my experience. There's also links in the description for resources on postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety if you want to read more about those. Did you suffer from postpartum depression, or did you suffer from postpartum anxiety? Leave your stories in the comments below. I really want to open up the discussion about this because more of us need to talk about it. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when my next video comes out.